A big welcome to this event today, where we're looking at university courses in education. The format is going to be, essentially, we're going to have two presentations. Kari in a second is going to kick things off, and Kari is going to provide an introduction to university courses in education. And then Ellen's going to come in after Kari finishes, and Ellen's going to talk to us about actual routes into teaching. So if anyone's watching this and they want to be a teacher, then Ellen's going to give you a guide to the process that's involved in that to actually get to become a teacher and work as a teacher in the future. I'm very conscious you've not tuned in to hear from me, you've tuned in to hear our fantastic speakers. So as far as my introduction, I'm going to leave things there, and I'll pass the floor to Kari if I can, please. And Kari, do feel free to get your presentation ready if you wanted to right now. Kari is joining us from Plymouth Marjon University, and Kari is going to give us an introduction to university courses in education. So Kari, without further ado, the floor is yours, please.
So as Jon says, I work at Plymouth Marjon University. And we are quite a small university based down in Plymouth. So very nice and close to the sea. So it's been lovely during lockdown. And I'm here to talk to you about kind of different education degrees. We're very well known for our education degrees, but what I've done for this presentation is really kind of have a look at what else is out there across the country as well. So it's not just me talking about our university. I've pulled information from all the universities, and my job role is one that very much I very much look at what's happening in the university sector as a whole. So it is very much kind of based around what is happening in the sector as a whole. So hopefully this will be useful. So what we'll cover: what do we mean by an education degree, the types of education degrees, which one's right for you, and graduate prospects. So education degree, what do we mean? So I did a bit of a Google of this because we use the word education degree quite a lot, and the education degrees available across the country are so broad and so wide-ranging. I wasn't entirely sure how to sum it up, but I think Times Higher Education has done quite a good job in summing us up. So education is the study of the process of receiving and giving systematic instruction. As a degree, it mixes a theoretical grounding in the history, anthropology, sociology, and economics of education, psychology and human development, and applied courses on teaching methods. Now, Ellen's going to talk a little bit more about the applied courses on teaching methods in the next part of this. So I'm really going to focus on, I guess, the really broad range of things that's covered there. So an education degree really is about working with people, whether that be looking at kind of the history of people, whether that be looking at kind of how people interact, whether that be actually looking at policies, policy making, and kind of the real world value of education, or whether that be looking more into the human mind and how do we kind of communicate with people, how do we interact with people, and especially kind of those people who we are giving instruction to. So education is really wide-ranging, and it's not just limited to working with teenagers or young people. Its education is very much a lifelong thing. Those people that teach at universities, they are educators, and they'll be teaching anyone from the age of 18 through to, I think the oldest I know of that we've had is a 70-year-old kind of coming to study. So it's really very much lifelong, and that's really exciting. But that also gives us a little bit of a kind of conundrum here as to how do we decide what we want to do within education. So here are some types of education degrees. Now, in general, they'll either be Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Sciences. They're the same level. I wouldn't worry too much about kind of working out what means what, but BA or BSc is pretty much what you're looking at, and then it can cover any of these areas. And I've just pulled off some of the areas that come up really often. So there's a lot of others that are very kind of niche, that maybe one university does it and they're the only university in the whole country does it, but in general these are the main ones. And when I did a search for degrees around education, I found 1,917 courses from 188 providers across the UK for entry from next September. Now that's a crazy amount, and I'll come on to talk about how do we even begin to narrow that down in a moment. But first I want to talk a little bit about kind of the different degrees. So as you might expect, outdoor education very much focuses on that kind of education in the outdoors. Now, you don't have to be teaching someone in the outdoors. You don't have to be teaching them how to do things, but actually just getting people into the outdoors, experiencing the outdoors. A lot of people that do outdoor education degrees may go on to become teachers. They may go on and do their PGCE, but they may go on and work in outdoor adventure centres. They might do something completely different, or they might go on and work more closely with things like forest schools. And if kind of the outdoors is something that's really interesting to you, I'd definitely recommend doing a bit of a read up on forest schools. One of the others, coaching. Now, coaching is generally something we think about within sport. And most of the coaching degrees out there are very much sport related. So there are things like coaching and PE, or straight up sport coaching, or there are some more kind of high-end level coaching degrees out there now as well. And these ones really focus on actually providing that kind of instruction for different sports overall. And there's, again, lots and lots of these degrees across the country. I think you'd be hard pressed not to find a university with a coaching degree that's kind of in your area. The other thing with coaching as well is actually it's something that is considered for business. So they are fewer and further between, but some universities do offer degrees in kind of coaching on the business side of things. So how do you coach people in a business? How do you coach people in life? Life coaching is something that's taken off, and I'm sure over the next few years that will become more popular around universities. And then we've got joint honours degrees, so education with in a specific subject. Now, usually these are kind of education with psychology, or it may specialise in a different subject, kind of a teaching subject. But really they're designed to give you that kind of theoretical underpinning of education, of working with people, but also mix in something like psychology. Education studies and early childhood, again, are quite similar in that sense. They are generally fairly geared to, we think you might want to go and become a teacher at some point, but you're maybe not quite there yet. So these are kind of areas that you might want to consider. And they do look at the kind of the pedagogy. So how do we teach? What is good teaching? But they'll be done in a kind of in a more theoretical base, whereas a lot of kind of real focused teacher training degrees will kind of intertwine theoretical with quite a lot of practice. Education and social policy and health and education, these ones are really kind of linked to actually looking forward and being that person potentially within government, kind of thinking about change. And they're really interesting because they do really look at kind of actually how has policy around education changed? How can we provide education to improve the health of people? And we're not just thinking here around kind of our typical 5 to 18-year-old. We are thinking population-wide. And then childhood, youth and education. And this is a degree that's taught at a lot of different universities. And it's very much kind of, if you know you want to work within kind of the youth sector, but actually you kind of more want to go on to the community side of things. So maybe you want to do something around youth community work. And that's a really, really good one. Teacher training undergraduate degrees, I'm sure Ellen will cover those in a moment, but those are really geared up for you to go straight into teaching at a primary level. There are some that are available for things like secondary PE, but they're generally less common. And then things like so special educational needs and disability studies. So if you're really, really interested in actually kind of those people with special educational needs and disabilities and how we work with them and how we actually ensure that they get the best out of their education, that they're really catered for within education, then that's a really nice degree, and it's something that can link really nicely with a primary PGCE afterwards, and that's what a lot of students do tend to do. And then psychology. Now I've put this in here as a standalone. I know I mentioned it above with the joint honours, but actually psychology, depending on the university and depending on the course, you can really specialise in childhood psychology and kind of that education around psychology. So that's a really interesting side of things as well. And that's just a few of the types of education degrees. So how do you even begin to decide? I'm going to start at the bottom first, because I think this is really important. So modules, are they interesting to you? So I'm sure many of you kind of within college or school, you get taught in a certain way. You get taught this subject for this many weeks, and then you move on to this subject for this many weeks, especially if you're doing something history or English, anything like that. There'll be kind of maybe 2 or 3 areas that you'll look at across a year. And that's kind of what modules are. It is very much a case of, for a lot of universities, there's around 6 in each year. And it is very much a case of they will have different areas of the subject they look at, and it all relates back to the wider degree. But unlike schools, universities set pretty much their own curriculum. So even if there is the same course at 5 different universities with the same course name, unless it's something that's really heavily accredited, so kind of anything that has professional accreditation, they're going to be kind of really quite close to each other. They'll be quite similar. But things like our BA and our BSc education courses, they could be wildly different across the whole range of universities. So it's kind of, are they interesting to you? Now, for me, I know personally, I quite enjoy a lot of the history side of things. I quite enjoy learning about how things have come about. So that's something that would really interest me. But I know there's lots of people out there who aren't interested in that side of it and actually want the practical side, like, how do I do this? So you really want to look at that. And then I think the second most important one is this one at the top, the location. So as I said, there's 188 providers of education related degrees across the UK. Okay, and that means wherever you are in the UK, there should be at least 1 or 2 universities within a couple of hours of you that will offer education related degrees. And so that's really, really important. Like, do you want to be really far away from home, or do you actually want to stay closer to home? There's no right answer to that. There really isn't a right answer to that. So it just comes down to personal preference, and also kind of then looking at other aspects of this. So actually, how do you want to learn? So is the course very much assessed by exams, or is it almost entirely coursework and based around kind of observing you in practicals, observing you out in the field as such? So a lot of education degrees, especially kind of the coaching, education studies, early childhood, they will often have placements, and some of that placement will be assessed. And that's really exciting if that's kind of the thing that you really like doing. And there's other areas as well. So number of people on the course, and is it a campus university or a city-based university? Now, universities range from around 3,000 to 50 to 60,000 people in a university. Now, that's very much, again, comes down to personal preference, comes down to how many people you want within class sizes. For education courses, again, they'll vary quite a lot across different universities, but kind of the smaller end, you're probably looking at around 15 to 20 people. The larger end, you're probably looking 100 to 150. So think that is something else to consider. How do you want to be taught? Do you like, at the moment, do you like being able to get your views across straight away when you're being taught something, or are you quite happy sitting there thinking about it and then coming and talking to someone afterwards? So really think about that. And then placement opportunities and study abroad opportunities. So I have already touched a little bit on the placements, but some universities will quite heavily provide placements within these education degrees. Some may only include a placement for one of your modules. Some will include a placement every year. And those are the things that you kind of want to look at and kind of maybe think, do I want to do something different with this in the future? So really, really important. And then also study abroad. Okay. Is there something, would you like to study abroad? Some universities do offer that. Obviously, at the moment, we are in a bit of a situation where we're not entirely sure how study abroad is going to be working. But hopefully, by the time you start applying for university, that will be a little bit more settled. So hopefully that's kind of looked at those areas a little bit. The graduate prospects. And the thing that I really want to say here is a degree opens doors, regardless of the degree. If you do fairly well in your degree, it will open doors no matter what degree it is. Okay, I have an events management degree, and I've had a lot of jobs where it's very much been a case of, we don't mind what your degree is, we just want you to have a degree of a certain level. Now that's something that works really nicely for me. So, and why is that? So degrees give you a range of different skills that you can transfer between different areas. And if you're looking at an education related degree, then you're also getting more skills that help you deal with people. And those are really key as well. If you're looking potentially at maybe at the end, you can go, oh, I'm not really sure I want to go into education. You can kind of go into anything, but you'll also have picked up some really key management skills that will help you go further. So things like knowing how to get the best out of people, things like knowing how to interact with people, how to develop people. And those are really key skills that kind of, as you go through your working life, those things will make you stand out from other people. Degrees also give you really good research and analytical skills, especially in education where you are constantly looking for that improvement. Really, really great communication and presentation skills. If you do any placement on an education degree, there really isn't any hiding. You have to learn how to present, you have to learn how to communicate. The ability to work in groups, the ability to problem solve, organisation skills, time management skills, and again, anything that you on placement for, you will really hone in on those organisation and time management skills, because you have to turn up at the right time with everything you need. There really isn't, for most kind of things around education, there really isn't a way of getting around that. It just has to happen. And lots of students start without those skills and really develop them. Okay. So from a graduate prospect side, you can obviously go into teaching, and Ellen's going to talk more about that in a moment. If you go down the psychology route, you can do more study to become an educational psychologist. Outdoor routes, outdoor activities manager or instructor. Now, a lot of the outdoor education degrees do give you more qualifications as well, and those are really useful to be able to go on and do those. It's kind of, the more qualifications you have, the more money you can ask for, basically, and the more jobs that are available to you in there. Things like education welfare officer, so working within kind of social services. Careers advisors. So I'm sure many of you have got a careers advisor at your school, and depending on kind of the routes that you're looking to go down, that's something you can look at. Outreach or schools liaison. Now, what I do is outreach, talking to different people, providing support like this, but a lot of businesses also do outreach. It's not just universities. When we usually we'd be touring the country, kind of in the months from March to July, going into different schools, and you'll always find lots of people from businesses there. And they have the same job as me, effectively. It's just they work for a corporate business rather than a university. And they're really exciting jobs. And again, it's something that communication, organisation, time management skills are really key for. Education support officers, sports coach, and we touched on sports coach before. Education publishing, so kind of actually if you've got a real passion for English, then something around that is really good. And policy development and research, so some of the courses we talked about were really heavily kind of looking at policy, and the more you kind of understand policy and you understand how to develop it and you understand how to research, the more you're going to get out of that. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an idea of what you could do with an education degree and what they're all about. I always think that education degrees are some of the most open degrees that we've got. So even if you decide not to go into teaching after them, they are there and they're going to give you lots and lots of different skills to enable you to move through life really well. Back to you, Jon.
Thank you, Kari. That's an excellent introduction to education courses, and particularly love the comment about picking universities and looking at locations. So many students don't do that. And so many students actually end up living where they studied after they finish. And the reason that is they might get a part-time job at university, especially in teaching, that turns into a full-time opportunity, or they meet a long-term partner. So it's such an opportunity to maybe actually decide long-term where you're going to live, pick a location. So it's great you mentioned that when picking a university to choose, and also university degrees. And just a really good introduction to education courses. So thank you very much, Kari. If anyone's got any questions for Kari, Kari will be available on the Q&A, and there's a Q&A tab right at the bottom of your screen. So do ask any questions for Kari. She'll be very happy to answer them during Ellen's presentation. And if I can now introduce our second speaker, that's Ellen, who's joined us from Bishop Grosseteste University. And Ellen is going to do a session looking at routes into teaching. So if you're watching this and you want to be a teacher, Ellen will provide an overview of the process that's involved in that. So Ellen, feel free to get your presentation ready if you like, just while I'm introducing you. And Ellen, I mentioned right at the start, is joining us from Bishop Grosseteste University, and they specialise in education courses. They've got absolutely loads of education courses. So Ellen, without further ado, the floor is yours, please.
Hi there, everyone, and thank you, John, and thank you, Kari, for that really informative presentation as well. So good morning and welcome, everyone. My name's Ellen, and I'm a Student Recruitment Officer here at Bishop Grosseteste University, but that's often a real mouthful to say, so we often refer to ourselves as BG or simply BGU. So our university has been training teachers for around 150 years. But today I'm here to give you a whistle-stop tour of the different routes that you can take if you're interested in becoming a teacher, whether it's at our university or any university throughout the UK. So we'll look at primary, secondary routes, or even specialising in other areas such as special educational needs, disability, or even teaching English abroad. So we'll get onto that in a little bit more detail later on. So in this session, we will be briefly covering the kinds of qualifications you'll need to become a teacher, the types of skills and qualities that universities and employers are looking for in teachers, the different routes you can take to get into teaching, so I'll look at undergraduate and postgraduate programmes, as well as more subject-specific courses. And we'll also look at the type of careers you can expect to go into once you've gained your teaching qualification. So yes, as the slide says, teaching is a graduate profession that requires a UK degree or equivalent. The most popular teaching courses are ones that include a qualified teacher status, which is better known as a QTS, or a postgraduate certificate in education, which is also known as a PGCE, which are usually undertaken after doing your first degree in a specific subject. Both routes require you to have obtained at least a level 4 or a grade C in GCSE English language and maths. And if you're wanting to go into primary teaching, or you want to be a secondary school science teacher, you'll also need at least a level 4 or grade C in GCSE science too. Some universities may ask for something higher than a C or grade 4, so you'll need to check this before applying. To apply to an undergraduate degree, you'll need level 3 qualifications, and this is usually A levels or equivalent. And grade requirements for these courses will really depend on the university that you choose to study in. To apply for PGCE, which is the Postgraduate Certificate in Education, you'll need at least a 2-2 degree classification. But again, this will differ in other universities, so it's depending on which one you apply to. So yeah, let's take a look at the other requirements you'll need to complete before becoming a teacher. And this includes really getting work experience. Here at BGU, there is no minimum requirement, but the more you do, the more scenarios, examples, and situations you'll be part of. It also means there's more to talk about when it comes to writing a personal statement, as well as if you go and attend any interviews, you can bring it up then. So think about helping out, at your local brownies, guides, youth clubs, possibly coaching, sports coaching for children. Any kind of experience like this looks really great, and it will really help boost your application. You'll also have to do a DBS check, and this is really just to ensure that you have no criminal convictions that would put anyone, especially children, at risk. everyone who works with children and young people in the UK must pass and have a DBS check. I do as part of my role as an outreach officer. And it doesn't really necessarily require you to do anything. You merely pay and apply for the check, and the service will do a background check on your behalf and then send you a certificate in the post a few weeks later if you have passed. So it's nothing to worry about. And then yes, the fitness to teach test. It's really just a requirement to ensure that a future teacher has both the physical and the mental fitness to perform your duties without putting children and young people at risk. And it usually just involves a really short questionnaire that's carried out externally. So again, this is really nothing to worry about, and it's nothing too strenuous. So yes, your personal statement. So by now you're pretty sure that you want to go down the teaching route. So what do you need to think about and include in your university application? So what universities look for in personal statements is your motivation. We want to know why you want to teach, and don't just say it because I love kids. We want you to be more genuine, more unique, and training providers will want to know why you believe you'll enjoy teaching that subject, and more specifically, why you'll enjoy teaching it to that age group. You also need to emphasise the relevance of your previous studies and experiences to the subject, and even the age group that you've chosen for teacher training. Give examples to illustrate each point, including examples from your own school or college experience, or any other experience that you have working with children. Like I've already mentioned, the more experience, the better, and including this in your personal statement shows you are committed, as well as having a real passion for working with children. And relate this to how it could help you on your university course. You should also discuss the studies that you've studied at school or college. Why did you choose them? What relevance do they have in regards to you wanting to teach? As a teacher, it's inspired you, include that kind of thing in your application. As long as you show commitment, enthusiasm, and a real passion for teaching in your personal statement, it will shine through to the universities that you applied to. So here we'll delve into a little bit more about the specific routes that will get you directly into teaching. So undergraduate level, you can get into teaching at undergraduate level, which basically means you can go straight into a teaching degree after leaving school or college. And this degree will usually last 3 years full time, so it's like a normal undergraduate degree. If you know for sure that you want to be a primary teacher, then studying an undergraduate degree in primary teaching with the QTS, which is the Qualified Teacher Status, remember, means you can go straight into a school as a teacher after your degree. So after the 3 years up, you can go straight into working as a teacher full time. And this is the quickest route to becoming a primary teacher, and it's one of the most popular routes. But it's not the only route. You could do a similar degree in a subject like education studies, which I know is really popular at our university. And often we offer this course for candidates that don't quite make the requirements of the primary studies QTS, or for people that don't necessarily absolutely know they want to go into primary teaching. Education studies is a kind of good backup. You learn about teaching in general. And then you can go into other routes as well after that, not just teaching. You could also do a degree in almost anything you fancy. So if you want to be a primary teacher, you could do an undergraduate degree in whatever you'd like, as long as you've achieved those GCSE standards we mentioned before. You would just have to then go on to do your qualified teacher status afterwards, but we'll talk about that a bit more on the next slide. If you're teaching at secondary level, you'll need to make sure that your undergraduate degree is at least 50% of the subject at which you choose to teach, or something equivalent. So, for example, if you want to be a maths teacher, you'll need to make sure your undergraduate degree was in either maths or a combined degree like maths and geography. It doesn't specifically have to be subject set. One of my friends has just been accepted onto a PGCE English course, and she studies philosophy at university. So sometimes there's a bit of leeway in what you apply for. So unless you're studying a degree which includes your QTS, you will need to do a postgraduate degree following your first undergraduate degree in order to get that qualified teacher status. So you spent 3 years studying that undergrad degree, and then you take your PGCE, which is a year if you're doing it full time, either specialising in primary teaching or subject specific, the subject specific that you'd like to teach at secondary level. There'll also be options to choose what kind of age groups you'd like to train with during this year. The year you spend completing your PGCE will mostly be spent in school setting, so you'll be able to get a real hands-on experience with this. You'll still be required to attend university 1 or 2 days a week and complete assessments in order to complete that PGCE and qualify as a teacher at the end of it. And just to know, if you're wanting to go down the route of being a special educational needs and disability teacher, then you would do your primary or secondary PGCE the same as I've mentioned above, but you'd make sure you'd organise your school placements in relevant settings, so you could go and work in special needs school or equivalent, and then you can also base your academic work on this particular specialism. And school direct programs. So these are a really fantastic route to go down again if you've already completed your degree, your first degree in a relevant subject. It's entirely school-based, this one, so you won't need to attend university. This will require some research, as not every school and college will take on school direct candidates, and if they do, they'll only have a set amount of applicants that they can take on. But if you can find a school that's willing to do it, then go for it, as you can get paid while you're training, and that's really fantastic. You'll have to look online to find where does it, and then you have to apply for it like a normal job on the school or college website. You'll then also have to complete a UCAS teach training application form to ensure that you've got the university's affiliation with it. It's also worth pointing out here that often the government are desperate to train more teachers here in the UK. So it's worth looking online to see whether the subject you'd like to teach is eligible for additional funding or bursaries. I know maths teachers are always in demand and they offer a couple thousand, well, quite a few thousand a year to teach in maths. So yeah, if you've got real interest in a certain subject, then it's worth looking online to see if you can get any money from there. So yes, the last kind of route, foundation degrees, the last kind of route into teaching that I mentioned is this degree, foundation degree of professional studies in education. This type of qualification is actually quite specialist, and not every university in the UK will provide this option. I had a little look on UCAS last night actually, and I think there's around 28 unis in the UK that do. But I thought it would be good to bring up because it's, you know, another alternative route if you do want to achieve a teaching degree through the merit of your practical abilities rather than your academic achievement. Applicants to these qualifications do usually tend to be a little older. They've often been working in teaching assistants in schools or colleges for a number of years, and they've decided they want to become qualified teachers. But this isn't always the case. We only really require 1 year's work experience at our university anyway, working in a relevant setting, and that's all that's required for our foundation degree. And then you'll still be in the school setting while you're studying at university over that 2-year course if you're doing it full time. On completion, you will still then have to top up to a normal degree and then a PGCE degree as well if that's required. So this route is a bit long-winded and it would take the longest to gain that qualified teacher status. However, because it's work-based rather than academic-based, it is quite popular and another one to consider if you're really keen on becoming a teacher. So yes, once you've completed your teacher training qualification, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go down the route, the traditional teaching route anyway. There are options to travel and teach. We do a TESOL course, and a lot of other universities do as well, which is teaching English to speakers of other languages, which basically means you are able to go travel around anywhere in the world and teach English to children, which is a really fantastic degree if you're into travelling or want to do that sort of thing. Or if you look on the slide here, you can go into youth work, for example, rehabilitation services, making sure young children and people feel supported and giving them opportunities. Or you could even be, I think we've got private tutor up there, coaching children in the evenings who want extra tuition, or even doing something like a private music teacher. Or if you've even done something like an English degree and a teaching qualification, then you can go down the route of content writing or go into the marketing industries. The point I'm trying to make here really is, even if you complete your teaching qualifications, as Kari also mentioned, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go and be a teacher in a school or college. There are plenty of other opportunities if you want to take an alternative route, or even if you've changed your mind about wanting to be a teacher. So one of the great things about being a teacher is the stability. You're always going to be needed. And although people don't go into teaching for the money, the wages aren't bad for graduates. As a newly qualified teacher in the UK, you'll begin on a salary of at least £24,373 or £30,418 in London. The average wage for a teacher in the UK is around £29,000 a year, but just as staying as a normal classroom teacher and working up the pay scale, you can earn just over £38,000 a year. And also, if you want to take on extra responsibilities whilst you're in the school, think of my school, we had lots of head of houses, head of years, deputy heads. Teachers can earn even more. Even up to the highest point of the leadership scale, where a head teacher can earn well over £100,000 a year. So, is teaching for you? You can't go into teaching thinking it's going to be a really easy ride, because it's absolutely not. You need to make sure it's right for you. Although the normal school day starts around 8:39 and finishes at 3:30-ish, there's so much work to do outside of school hours. You need to think of all the planning and preparing sources, marking, which is usually completed in the evenings and the weekends. Although you might not think that. I know I used to think my teachers had a really easy ride and they just worked to the set normal hours, but that is absolutely not true. They do a lot of out-of-hours work. They've also got limited flexibility. So although they get really lovely long holidays, Christmas, Easter, the long 6-week break over summer and half terms, they can't take holidays in term time and get the cheaper holidays. They have to take it when all the kids are going. So not only is it more expensive for them, it also means they are always holidaying with children, which is a bit annoying for them. But a career in teaching is very rewarding. You work hard to get into teaching, and completing a degree or a PGCE, you will get lots out of it. Get to see your kids grow and learn, and it's a really professional job to be proud of. Like I've also mentioned, it's really good job security as well. Children will always need an education, therefore will always need teachers. Some teachers also spend their whole careers in one school, whilst others move around. So everywhere you move, there will be schools in an area that need teachers. So you've got that flexibility. If you do choose to move, whether in the UK or worldwide, you've got that flexibility that you can pretty much work anywhere in the world, which is actually quite an unusual trait and a really fantastic one. It's also really varied and interesting. Even if you're teaching the same subjects each day, students respond to things in different ways and will be of different abilities. And that basically brings us to the end of this presentation. Like Jon mentioned, if you've got any questions, obviously ask away in the Q&A section.